Dr. Powers, the guest has arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnycastle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. So I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Cat sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke Cat sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say to say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnycastle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions to edit and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this would be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you'll use throughout the program, and many in this course. But if for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime. But for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure. But do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life. And as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites, and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. There's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues? And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families, to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria. And I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And so most of the time you'll find me at that number unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. Well, let's get at it if we can. And wow, there's so much in the paper today to talk about. We talk in terms of the Deutsche Bank and the 51 banks over there that are against the stress test up against the wall, and the British exit from the European Union. Lots of stories in here. We can't cover them all today, but as the weeks unfold, we will get at them. But let's have a look at some of the stories on the front page in the business section and draw some conclusions. The first one starts off with the premiers are drawing battle lines with Prime Minister Trudeau over the government's policy on carbon tax pricing. And there's a fight building that it may not be the right time for this, but we go on. We talk about the idea that it's going to be mandatory imposed by 2018 if the provinces haven't found their own way forward to get up to 50% pricing on this thing. We're going to end up with the government imposing it, federal government imposing it. And so, as I said in this class, there's no political correctness, and it's becoming that the global warming is almost a religion today, that if you speak against it or try to have a conversation in that area, wow, you get shut out pretty fast. And so, poking the bear a little bit today, I'm going to just start off with the assumption, test the hypothesis, that yes, there's global warming, but is it fair to conclude that the amount that man does is sufficient to take the blame for all of it? And I simply suggest, if you look back 5 billion years for the Earth's history and the coming and goings of ice ages, long before we had the situation we have today in greenhouse gases, there may be some arguments that this is going to occur whether we like it or not. But having said that, a topic for conversations is that this tax emission, the carbon tax credits, gas out of Alberta, for example, is a commodity. And there we have gas coming from Mexico. Mexico doesn't sign on to the global initiative. Canada does, layers on these taxes, And so if the price of butter is 50 cents more at this store than your store, which one are you going to buy for the end of the day? And so that's what we're faced with. We have to look at it. Property sales tax in Vancouver area has resulted in a plunging of the sales and that have taken place in the last little bit with this foreign tax credit that has taken place over there and been put on. The numbers are a 33% drop in the sales of homes, and they're closing certain tax loopholes. And so again, we could maybe raise the question in here that it was said that man is born free, yet everywhere he's in chains, and to the extent that if you're right-wing Attila the Hun, like some of us, you question the role of government in your affairs, dealing with your private home and your real estate. Do they have the authority to do that? Some will say yes, some will say no, but it's worth looking at as we go through this. Certainly where does it stop for the states? Is the next thing there'll be rent controls to put in as to a freeze on rent rates? At what point does the government stop this? And so we need to look at that particular aspect of it. In fact, maybe a good time to talk a little bit about, we all come with biases to this course. At the two poles, one is Plato, the idea of the collectivist, the idea of Marxism, the idea of the NDP, that sort of view of the world, one for all for one, lots of social safety nets. At the other side is you have the folks that are John Stuart Mills. He was a libertarian, but you have David Ricardo, Adam Smith, John Wayne, those folks on that end of the things that basically less taxes, get out of the way, I'll take it. And so we have this playing out in almost everything we do. And so again, the idea of the carbon tax credits applied universally across Canada, when Alberta, with due respect to our colleagues out there, are a basket case right now. Their economy has been hit blow after blow after blow, and there's no sign of it easing off. They're going to have to reposition themselves. And so Alberta's going to have to do this. It's just one more hit to the oil industry in Alberta. And then back on the property side of it, is this what role do you see in here? Should the government get out of this business and leave it to the individuals, the free marketplace, let the demand-supply curve dictate the price of the housing, or should the state be involved in artificially tampering with rent controls and mortgage rates, et cetera, et cetera? So we can have a look at it. I see here that there was a talk briefly that you recall we had a minister for democratic institutions that for some reason or another in her citizenship, she misrepresented where she was born. And the question now is, should there be some sort of moratorium? Indeed, should her citizenship be canceled because she gave fraudulent documents? And so, an interesting talk. It certainly is a challenge. Anastasia Lin, she was Miss World Pageant, Canadian representative, went to China, was blocked, was not allowed into China because of the human rights and her very outspoken opinions on human rights in China. And for that reason, she was barred from participating. And so the question becomes for us here is increasingly there's a role for Britain and for Canada to have stronger economic linkages, economic interdependence with the Chinese, and it comes at a cost. And so again, as citizens of Canada, we should understand to what extent are you prepared to give some ground on issues like human rights in order to gain some competitive advantage, some economic advantage for Canada's economy that frankly is slated by the IMF recently as 1.2 is what's forecasted for this year in GMP, 1.2, which is slightly flatlining. And so we're going to have to decide that issue is how close we'll get to the Chinese on that issue. Debate we had between Klein and Pence. I don't think either one hurt themselves in any particular way. And the real question to be asked there is that if there was a heart attack by one or the other, would the Vice President be able to stand in? And I think we accept that either one could probably stand in. I have my own personal favorite based on my biases I've just explained. She would probably find me in the Pence camp, but many out there may well be anti-Trump and in the other side. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no wrong or right answers in this class. As long as we have a good discussion, drop the data and the facts out on the table, sift it and come to some conclusion, then that's fine with us as we go through it. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes as we go into it. I see the provinces agree to back Ottawa's proposal to expand the Canada Pension Plan. It takes some while before it kicks in, but they want to up the amount that your employer pays, up the amount that you'll pay, but the result is you'll get a far more significant check when you retire, get to my age, more significant check when you retire from the government by part of your pensioning, because there's many seniors out there that are living in close to poverty, and it's needed. So what do you think about the Canada Pension Plan? Do you think you folks should be paying that? I mean, it begs the question that the way the demographics have worked in Canada, the baby boom are flushing through, and we need more young people, more millennials, more folks to pay into the system, so us old farts at 76 can get our paychecks. And so we need immigration. We need the right immigration that can come in, talented, earn, contribute to Canada's wealth, and continue this Canada Pension Plan, these social safety nets. If we do not bring the immigrants in and make them Canadians and have these contributions, then I think all these safety nets of healthcare and other things are in jeopardy. So part of the conversation today is the recognition of the power of the immigration folks, the new people coming to Canada, the talent they bring, the Rolodex they bring, the connections they bring, the cross-cultural sensitivity they bring, all these good things we need in order to make Canada be the nation that it is. So we could talk a bit about that sort of need and how do we attract and retain immigrants, because today it's a competitive world out there, and talented immigrants don't have to come to Canada. They can go all sorts of places in the world are seeking them out. And we can question the idea of the immigrant situation in Europe, and we'll talk about that maybe next week, and some of those that are coming into America. I think to a less extent, although we're taking a large number in, there's this concern for terrorism, and we can talk a bit about that next week too. But in any event, we're talking about the CPP and the need for immigration in order, given the demographics, that we need to build up Canada's population. I mean, just raise the question. Canada sits as the second largest landmass in the world, with 25% of the world's fresh water, all the richnesses of oil and gas and water and rare earths, etc., with only 34 million people. Is it a realistic expectation that you're going to be able to hold on to Canada when push comes to shove? I don't think so. We may have to be a junior partner and find a senior partner to help protect us. We can talk about that next week. On the business side of the house, I see our dollar rise around 76 cents. Gold has a big drop recently. It's down to $112,069, $1,270 roughly, which is a significant drop from the mid-range of the 1,300, 1,370. It's dropped almost $100 in a couple of weeks. Oil rides down around 48 cents, long way down from the $1.40 a barrel to the lows in the 30s and back up to the 40s, and it seems to be hovering around this sort of level at the present time. We'll talk a bit about oil too. I see new rules are challenged on the non-bank lenders. Ottawa is bringing in, whether we like it or not, it gets implemented next week. I record this on the Wednesday prior to the week, so you folks are seeing this on Monday. I put this together about 3 or 4 days ago, but that's the way it has to be to get through the editing and the processing. In any event, on the 18th, in a couple of weeks' time, all these new rules that the Bank of Canada wants to bring in will impact not just the conventional banks, but will institute as well the alternative lenders, the near banks. And right now, the banking industry is, because of the Internet of Everything, and we'll learn more about that as we talk. In fact, in the next few weeks, you'll have a chance to catch up on this. On the Internet of Everything, banks are under attack, and the competition's fierce, and so they're downsizing, they're changing their business model like mad, they're getting into fintech sort of software to help robot advisors to make it all come to pass. We have mortgage brokers that are handling the mortgage business, and I have to say, I mean, my world, I have a credit union and a bank. I don't know anybody there, and I've been with them 20 years. They come and go like the water. If I want something from it, it's got to go up the pipe and back down the pipe. My point is, I have no loyalty to the institution as long as the service is there when I need it, and the online banking is there when I need it, and they don't screw it up too badly. I'll stay with them, but I have no loyalty to them. And so increasingly, the banks are finding that all their profit centers are being farmed out, and people like Apple are coming in now with the pay system, and PayPal are starting to eat at it. These near banks are coming in saying, we'll do the mortgage side of the house. Robot advisors, independent advisors, fintech advisors are not bank-driven necessarily. They're available to you to get some advice on investments. They're available. And so the banks are under stress, and I have to wonder if they didn't lobby the Bank of Canada to put this in, because this completely cripples the near banks, as alternative lenders that you get a mortgage from anybody, like First National Financial Corporation. Their business is growing like by 13%. Well, if they're going up 13%, banks are losing by 13%. And so there's lots of stress. So it's not an unthought of thing that you have a duty to use lobbyists, that they would lobby the government and get lobbyists to introduce some sort of government like this that says basically, if you don't mind, all the institutions, we're now going to insist that you do a credit check and that you do a ratio of their lending that's just under 40% free. After 40% is what they have to cover the servicing of the mortgage and heat and light and all those extra things. And if they're not within that ratio, then they can't have a mortgage. And the interest rate for it is something like 4.65%, even though you can get your mortgage for like 2.9 or whatever it happens to be. They still do the calculation for your stress at the 4.65%. Well, what's that going to do to the housing market? And it's going to drive out of business, or certainly contract the business of these folks that are entering the banking area are going to be driven back by this. So we want to look at that and just consider, again, we always not just read what's in the paper, we try to reflect upon what's driving this and why. And I have to, the banks are powerful in Canada. And I'm kind of left with the notion that to what extent was this put back into place to restore the bank's position and squeeze out these newcomers into the system. And then we come to the emission tax as the latest hit on the oil patch. We talked briefly about what it's going to mean to Alberta, this carbon tax credit that's coming up. It's a $30 a ton on Alberta by 2018. That's a big blow. And it led me to ask you the question, what's the biggest expenditure in your budget every month? What's the biggest expenditure in your budget every month? And the first thing you'll say probably is housing, but it's not. It's tax. We work right up to about, according to the Fraser Institute, till about the 6th of June every year to pay all the different taxes that you have to pay, your GST and your income tax, provincial taxes, and all those taxes you have to pay. So you work for government for 6 months a year before you're allowed to keep $1 for yourself. And so we don't want any more taxes. There's tax fatigue in here as we go through this. And the same with these poor oil companies in Alberta as a whole. They're a basket case in what's happening out there. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes, about the fossil fuels and the role for fossil fuels. It's not going to get any brighter. Gold drops below 1,300. We just mentioned that, but the Fed rate concern, as they say, is what's driving this. But I think you're going to see just after the election, they'll push the interest rates up in the States marginally. And there's no more secret to it. There's no secret to it other than simply the election's over. They make the economy look as best they can for President Obama this side of November the 6th. After November 6th, watch for the economy in America for the true fissures start to show, and that will include an interest rate hike. And again, its GMP running about 1.6 this year, which is not much better than Canada. Drop in capital on Bank of Montreal. Bank of Montreal is interesting. I'll talk with the European banks next week. There's some serious things going over there, particularly with the Deutsche Bank. IMF, I said, cuts down our rate, and we're talking about raising. I mean, the Bank of Canada says we're going to have to raise our interest rates in Canada. We're considering raising, and certainly the Americans have considered raising our rates, and it just doesn't make sense with GMP at 1.2. So I think that talk will dissipate quickly. My fat little arthritic fingers here. Turn the page. Canada can lead the energy revolution. I chuckled when I saw this. It's by David McKay. He's the president and CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada. But with due respect, I think he's out of step. Let's just talk for a few minutes about that. That the whole article is about making more efficient the oil and gas industry in Canada and cleaner in Canada. But he's focused really on oil and gas. But the reality of the world is, and you only have to be reading the papers to go to Ontario and other places, increasingly fossil fuels on a demand-supply curve are withering. And I'm not talking 100 years, I'm talking withering as early as 2021 with the new drone cars coming in. Every little bit reduces the demand. Solar power panels are coming in. And if you go, in fact, I'm going to ask you, as I'll talk about in a moment, the YouTube video clip I have up for you is about an hour long, but it talks specifically about the Internet of Everything and gives you some real examples and what this is going to do to almost every business sector. And you're going to have to start thinking, how can you harness the energy of these new technologies, new industrial revolution that's coming upon us? We have to think about that. But in any event, he's talking about oil and gas. I'm suggesting to you, short of some black swan event of a Gulf of Hormuz or some sort of a crisis, the demand-supply curve is a glut right now. Not large, but a glut of oil in the world. And I think we are going to stay at around the $40, $45 in the mid-40 range for a considerable period of time. I don't see $140 a barrel any longer. And when you talk about fracking, I think it's well over $50 you need to make a fracking situation work. It's troubling. I think we have to start about repositioning and getting ourselves first off the mark. Not first, people are out in front of us, but we have to get moving off the mark in order to start getting involved in alternative energies in a much bigger way than we're doing now, and solar power energy, etc. I know the cry as recently as a year or two ago, they said solar was too expensive, but if you look at the recent innovation, you'll find they're now hitting points of 2.6 per kilowatt hour compared to the rate that we get from BC Hydro now. They charge us 6 on one tier system up to, I think, a high of 12 cents on the other tier. And so my point is that solar can be quite compatible with the new solar shingles and things that are coming in. So it's something we need to look at, but certainly I think he needs to simply revisit and understand that the lifespan of fossil fuels is diminishing hourly. Need for capital projects like the oil sands and the Kinder Morgan pipelines and the Northern Pipeway and the major pipeway we're just trying to get down into the States, Keystone Pipeline, all those are questionable if you have to recover the capital costs. I don't think the lifespan of the project will be long enough to get your money back. But there's no wrong or right answers. These are just poking bears worth discussion. But we need to have these discussions so that you can go back to your businesses and have a good hard look at how you're doing things in the light of this new reality. And I think he hasn't caught up with the new system. But again, I could be wrong. Canada behind on dealing with digital disruption, and I have to say with artificial intelligence and quantum computing just here and just on the cusp and just coming, 20 years from now and even sooner, once that hits, quantum computing and artificial intelligence, we're going to find that it's going to be very hard for us to keep up, particularly quantum computing, keeping up with our security. And certainly right now, Yahoo secretly scans user emails for U.S. intelligence. The book I've been writing on this topic is Through the Looking Glass, the Internet of Things. Part of that is the dark side. Once you step through, you can't get back. Once your data is up on the site, big data takes over. You can't get your data back on these things. And so the idea of data security and data privacy and data sovereignty and data censorship all come into play, and we need to understand those dangerous areas as we sign on for this brave new world. Ericsson cuts 39 jobs in Sweden, again based on China's economic advantage, but that's going to change too, and we'll talk a bit about that in the weeks to come. But I think the day for China and India, again with the Internet of Everything and the use of robotics and harnessing the energies that are available to us, the pendulum on employment will swing back to the developed countries. In Europe, they're not talking about raising the rates as they are in the States. They're saying the European Central Bank is set to keep its interest rates low and till it gets its inflation back on target. And so they want to bring its rates down. And right now, the European Union is a very serious case, and we'll talk about that next year. There's lots in there that could impact Canada. And again, the Feds make a strong case to raise their rates, but it won't be until after the election. Trump was talking, and again, we've talked about the political ideology, but we're also talking here with Trump, and we should spend a few minutes on this topic, that it seems to me that it's not, Donald just happened to get the parade and be out in front of it. I think globally there's this growing concern. We saw it in Britain, the idea of nationalism, not so much protectionism, but nationalism rearing its head again, and there's a very strong group that had control in the sense of globalists trying to bring it back towards sort of one-size-fits-all, this world order, this new world order that they're talking about out of Brussels and other places. And so you have this clash of ideology between the two, and certainly in Britain, they sent something like in the order of $13–14 billion to the European Union as part of being part of the family, and they got back in benefits. They costed about $4.1 billion back. So it cost them damn close to $10 billion to be a member of the club at a time when they could use those monies back in Britain. The fishermen in the North Sea for centuries have been fishing in the North Sea, and the powers to be, the bureaucrats there, said you can't fish there anymore, we're going to give the rights to Spain. And so it's this sovereignty. We didn't give, the government in the States just signed over the internet naming domains to this world order again to control. And one of the first things I heard in there is they now were floating the idea as recently as yesterday of a global of a Google tax, that every time you search something, the intellectual property, in this class, like I'm reading this paper, you have to pay for that as some sort of Google tax, because I'm now using intellectual property, using the internet to do that. And so there's all sorts of stuff in here we need to look at. And so Trump is adopting the nationalist position, saying if you don't mind, free trade's a good thing, but the idea of taking it to the next level of political union, of some sort of level of offshore governance, has to be really closely looked at. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, we have to look at that because it comes with, in fact they won't disclose what's in it. We've got a draft copy of one chapter only on intellectual property, and we don't like what we see in there. But the rest of it, it's much like Pelosi on the medical care system. Sign it first and then we'll get around to talking about what's in it. And so there's these concerns. You have a duty. You are the up-and-coming business leaders, decision makers for Canada. And so you should know what's in the TPP, and are you prepared to sign off on that? Because if you're not, the people are marching on, signing these things for you, and you're locked in. And so here we have Trump as a nationalist trying to bring this back, and he's talking about fracking, and I've talked about fracking. It seems to me the studies I've done there, it's over $50, and unless the price of oil gets up into that zone, we can talk about fracking as much as you want. I don't see there's any money in it for the period of time, but and there's all the bad side of what it may or may not do. To the soil, to the watersheds, etc. Of course, of those issues, but even just the question, I think fracking right now, given the realities, I don't see a long lifespan for that anymore in any event. But again, I could be wrong. It's worth a discussion. And out there in the audience, we have a number of you that are involved in the oil industry, and so please contribute and fire back. There's nothing wrong saying, "Power, you're full of crap." I accept that, but let's have that discussion. I'm giving you some thoughts. I'm where I'm thinking, and correct me and fire back at me just as good. But lots in there to talk about, the TPP and trade and nationalism, and are you for Trump or are you for Hillary? And either way works fine for me. Indian Central Bank are going to cut their Fed rates. They're cutting the rates, and I have to point out that their new president, I knew he's been there in a couple of years, Modi, doing a fabulous job over there. He's driving that place. He's bringing in it's becoming fast a hub for the internet, for the intellectual capital, for software, for computers, for semiconductor industry. He's driving that into a hub. He's really got a power thing going here, and worth watching what he's doing to India. Much there we can learn. Nigeria's bad loans. Nigeria is a basket case. Bad loans sign the difficulties in there that they're having with their country. They've got terrorists working in Nigeria. It's a shame. It's a large country, 185 million people. Could be a great economy, but it's struggling right now. Google is talking about buying Twitter. Worth looking at. Mortgages a bridge too far. Canadian stocks rally. I think that's probably enough in there for today. What I want you to do for a minute, and it's important to me that you do this. I've made a video about an hour long on the Internet of Everything, and I take you through it basically in the 4 parts. I know it's an hour. Get a glass of cheap red wine or a cold beer, but sit there. But I want you to look at that. It's going to help you with your first assignment, and gives you some thoughts. And the challenge for me is that as fast as I find something, some innovative Internet of Everything, innovation, exponentially, there's more innovation leveled on that. So by the time you get talking about this, I find tomorrow there's some new offshoot of that that's just taken to the next step. And so that's what's so fascinating. This thing is just, it's like a bunch of billiard balls, bang, 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 just going and multiplying on things. Well worth watching. So anyway, have a look at that, have a look at that video, and then come back. This session is about a strategist's perspective, trying to get your mind right before we start strategy and how you're supposed to think. And this idea of the online booking, transforming the travel agency, impacts my mind, along with the idea of it says why banks feel very, very afraid. And here the bankers talking about the threat by I think it's Google and Facebook. Google and Apple are breathing down the banks, trying to start a whole new banking industry of online banking, and things like PayPal and Apple Pay, those sort of things are coming in. And this all speaks to something that we need to be aware of, and that's the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is this interconnectivity that we have on everything we do. There's over 50 billion sensors are going to be here within 4 years. 50 billion sensors. And we're all going to be linked. And I mean, I can just ramble for a few minutes. We're talking about, I read an article the other day of if you can picture a dish for solar power that's lasered down to the collectors on the Earth, that's 200 miles up over our heads. And I'm not talking a baby dish. I'm talking a dish the size of 5 or 6 football fields snapped together. This is significant size, but it's 24 hours a day shooting electricity at a good price down to Earth. That's going to be transformational on the fossil fuel industry. We need to look at that. We need to look at Google. Google are putting these electric cars together. They're almost out here now. They're just around the corner. They're not like 20 years out. They're getting ready to come to us, and certainly in 10 years, I suspect the Google car is something we're going to be much more familiar with. And we're not going to call it cars. To me, it's a mobile office that you're going to get in, give direction where you want to go, and then everything is there for you. You can do your office work in this little box that'll take you from point A to point B. And if you take the drones, we now control drones electronically. All the American drones, and drones are a big issue. In fact, Amazon delivering things are now getting drones up to 400 feet off the ground coming in. It's not a quantum leap to see these automobiles, these mobile offices, actually elevated and going on channels to move from point A to point B. We talk about 3D printing of organs, which is coming, and they're underway now as we talk, growing ears, and a little harder on kidneys, but they're doing kidneys and pancreases and things of this nature. The University of Alberta has started this sort of process of looking at this. The idea of a computer chip in your leg, your hand, whatever it happens to be. They're doing this now. People get released from Guantanamo, but they have a chip in their back that wherever these folks go in the world, they're being followed and monitored. We're not far away, and we can have this discussion about privacy and not wanting it, and I'm one of those that speak against it, but the reality is, folks, that we're getting everything. Samsung televisions, the new televisions, whether you like it or not, they have the ability to watch you and record what you're saying and do the analytics on that as to what you liked and what you didn't like. Cars at the present time, we have this Star service that if you want to, something goes wrong in your car, you can immediately just start talking to somebody there, and equally, theoretically, they have the ability to shut down your car at any particular point they want to, and theoretically they can speed it up and put the brakes on. All this is just around the corner, and so are you ready for the Internet of Things, and how is it going to impact your daily life, and are you ready for it in your businesses, and more importantly, from a strategist perspective, how are you going to take advantage of that? Because the reality is, folks, let me even go further if I can for a few seconds on that. It's so important when you think of the Internet of Things. I want you to think for a minute that I'm seeing that we have the capitalist model, but the capitalist model is starting to get a high bit of change because of the Internet of Things. I'm going to suggest to you that because of this collaborative commons that the Internet provides, that the old model of capitalism, that's this, if you can imagine, that this curve that comes down and slightly to the right, but the economies of scale kick in for the number of units you produce over time. The cost keeps coming down, the more efficient, the more learning, the more you produce, the cost comes down up to a point that you kind of bulk out and goes up. So, for example, if you had a hamburger facility, up to a certain point, you can produce hamburgers, and the price per hamburger comes down until like 10 buses roll up the front of your place, and that throws up your production operations management to such thing that the price then chug-lugs back up. But that's the traditional capitalist model, and we all strive to get down that learning curve, that economy of scale curve, efficiency curve as fast as we can. But under this new model, the Internet of Things is making it such that it's almost zero-based, zero marginal-based economy. That this newspaper, it costs the money for this paper to be produced, and it comes down that curve just like I talked in the traditional model. But if you do this in line, the 7.2 billion people in the world today can read this paper. So it's zero marginal cost because it's a collaborative commons. And this goes on almost to everything, whether it be music, shows, education. I mean, you don't need this school to come into this place and sit in bricks and mortars. I mean, it's nice for the bonding aspect of it. But right now, Wharton has got these massive online courses. They've put almost 8 million people, and they're free. You can take a strategy course at Wharton tomorrow, sign up for it, and you can attend and get the same sort of instruction from a Wharton instructor, and doesn't charge you a penny. And that's all part of this new way we're doing it. I mean, do you have to come into this this sort of environment and Or can you take little, like this course, can you take little parcels here and there and bits and pieces of it and take them at your time and your pleasure? And so this Internet of Things is changing the way we're going to think about things. This collaborative commons, we're sharing things more and more. And so the whole new business models are going to have to be redeveloped, this strategist perspective. We can't rely on the industrial age tools of traditional way of thinking. And I raised the point in here that if you look at the Pike's Fish Market little story, we end up with individuals there that how do you harness the energy of one person? And if you believe one person makes a difference to your bottom line, how do you measure that one person? It's not return on investment. It's not the traditional 5 categories of ratios that are in your little black book. But we've got to develop some new metrics to do all this. And so we'll talk some of this as we go through the course, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things on your daily lives and changes it makes, and a bit more discussion as to how big this is. Good. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. It's certainly a lot in there to think and reflect upon. I know it's going to impact every one of your businesses and your sectors. But that's it for today. We've covered a lot of materials in there for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. Call me anytime. I'm here for you, even including the weekends. See you next week. Bye-bye.